In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a CorelDRAW subject. Now, I had someone send me this file, and their question is, when they go to print this out, you can see the thickness of the letter T. That outline prints the way they want it to print, but when they go to try to cut this out of a heat press vinyl or sign vinyl, that same thickness doesn't cut. And the question is, why doesn't it cut? And this can be a very frustrating thing because a lot of times what we see in CorelDRAW is not actually what we would cut. And there's a very good reason why that is. But we really have to take a more in-depth look. So let's go ahead and just separate this T from the rest of these letters, and let's look at that letter T. What's happening with this letter T? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is switch over to my object manager and click on my letter T. And the reason I do that is because I want to see in the object manager if there's anything special going on. And what do I mean by special? Well, if this had a contour, you would see that appear over in the object manager. So for example, let me come into my contour docker and let me just give it a contour to the outside just so you can see what would happen. So when I hit apply, you can see something happened to it, but my point is when we go back into our object manager, we could very clearly see that there is some type of an effect applied to this because it says contour, right? So that's not the case with this particular object because when I select the object, it just says it's artistic text. Now, the next thing that I'm going to key in here is I'm going to look in the lower right-hand corner. See that little fill bucket? And then just below that, you have a little pen nib. And what this is telling me is that there's an outline property assigned to this. You can see it says 4 points. So the next thing I might do is come over here to my outline pen and say no outline and look at what would happen to the design if I had no outline. Okay, so now that's what's giving it the thickness. If we look at the other letters, you can see that this T is now more representative of all the other letters. So what's really happened here is there's been an outline applied to this. Now here's what I want you to key in on very, very closely, and it might be a little bit difficult to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the color of this particular object. Let's give it like a blue color so maybe we can see this a little bit better. So if I come in here and apply that same 4-point outline, do you actually see what's happening here? What's actually happening here is you can see the blue part was the size of the original letter T. And then this black line that you're seeing around it, that is the 4-point outline that's been added to it. Alright, and then the thickness, the reason that this outline got thicker is because there's actually 4 points that's been added to the outside and the inside. Now, where things get a little bit complicated, if I were to change my letter T back to black, this is what we want. This is what we want to be able to actually cut. So that's visually the way we want it to look, but what happens when I come into wireframe mode? Because when you go into wireframe mode in CorelDRAW, that's going to tell you what is actually going to cut on your vinyl cutter. So when we come into the view menu here and choose wireframe, watch very closely what happens to our letter T. Something very different happens, right? Let's go back to enhanced mode. You can see it's nice and thick, and now I come into wireframe mode and it's skinny mini. Why is that happening? Well, the reason that's happening is because all we've really done is we've told CorelDRAW to show me what this object looks like with a 4-point outline. But when we actually go to cut, it doesn't recognize that outline property. It just recognizes the object itself. So what do we do in a situation where we want to actually cut what we're seeing with that added thickness of that outline? This is a very common task that you're going to do time and time again, so it's important you understand these concepts. So what we're going to do now is if we select And we're going to do this in wireframe mode because you're going to see something kind of special happen here. So we have our object selected, and then I'm going to come over here to my object manager, and I'm going to right click on the highlighted object and choose convert to curves. Now obviously we could also have chosen Control Q. That would have been another option. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a shift. We're going to add a shift Control Q. And what that does is if we have an outline property, which in this case we do, we're going to convert the outline to an object. So here's what we're going to do. Shift Control Q. And now you can see what we have. We now have a curve object, and now we have a very, very different looking T. Now I'm going to try and dissect this a little bit for you because you can see it really, this could really get confusing in a hurry. But if we really sit and think about it for a minute, I think you'll be able to follow along pretty well. If you look at these two lines right here, these two lines were the original outline on the object. Then we have 4 points to the inside, which makes this line, and we have 4 points to the outside, which makes this line. Now if we look at the letter T, it's a little bit different. This line right here in the middle, we have 3 lines that are essentially making up the letter T. So this line was the original. We have the 4 point to the inside, and we have the 4 point to the outside. Okay, so that's why it has so many lines. So what we need to do to thin this down to get to what we want to get to is we're going to delete the interior line right here. So watch this first one that goes bye-bye. Okay, that was the first one, and you can see that that essentially was grouped together. All right, so all of that goes away. And now we have the next outline that we want to get rid of. And so the next outline, if we look at this spacing that we have right here is what is exactly what we want. And then all we have to do is get rid of, you know, you can see now all this is actually all one. Let's go back over to our enhanced mode so we can see this a little bit better. So we're getting close to what we want. But actually, what we really want is this center part of the T to be all black. So we're very close to what we need. We have the outline, but watch what we have to do. And this is where things get complicated again. Because in order to really get down to what we want, we have to break this apart again. Now, I'm actually going to duplicate this because really, there's a couple of ways we can do this. Let me show you one way to do it. This is probably the more drawn out way once you understand what's really happening here. So what I could do is I could come into my shape edit tool and I could come in here and delete all these interior nodes of this letter T. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here and delete all these nodes on the interior of my letter T, and then come down here. And again, we'll delete all these interior nodes again. Alright, and that gets us to the object that we actually want to cut. So we've thickened up the T a little bit, and certainly we've thickened up the outline, and that spacing in between certainly isn't as wide as what we started with. So you can see it's a much bolder looking font, and it really looks great. So the very good font for doing athletic fills. Okay. Now, what do we do? What I think is the smarter way to do it, rather than go in and delete all those nodes. Well, this takes a little bit of CorelDRAW skill, a little bit of knowledge of understanding what's really happening here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click on the object and choose this option, break curve apart. We could use the keyboard shortcut of Control K. And now you can see we have something that we really don't want. We just have a thick T. And this is why I was saying it does take a little bit of CorelDRAW knowledge to understand what's really happening here. Let's go back into wireframe mode and take a closer look. So these two outlines, these first two lines represent the outline around our letter T, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and select those two. select one, hold my shift key, select the other, and choose this button right here, or hit Control L, which is combine. So now that's combined, and then all I have to do is, remember earlier we deleted all the nodes that made up the interior part of the letter T? Well, now that's just one object, so I can just boop, delete, gone. Okay, that is much easier to get to the same result. So when I come back in here to the enhanced mode, you can see we have the exact same result, but it's just a different way of going about it. So you may have to watch this video or a time or two to really understand all those individual steps and the individual concepts, but you can see it's going to be very easy to manipulate this font, and you'd have to do that obviously for each letter, but you can see it's fairly easy to do, and you'll get the exact result that you're looking to get, because when you go back into wireframe mode, you can see that we have the nice thick outline, and what you see for your outlines here is exactly what your vinyl cutter is going to cut. So I hope that helps you out with enhancing certain fonts that you may have on your system and doing these nice thick outline fonts. Thanks for watching.